There comes a moment in your life where the noise of the outside world becomes louder than your own inner voice. That is the moment of choice. You can either keep bending your identity to fit the shape of others' expectations, or you can begin the practice of reclaiming your essence. When we are born, we are free, unburdened by judgment. But as we grow, we are handed masks, one by one. Be this. Don't sit, say that. Dress like this. Walk like them. And slowly, we begin to forget the face we had before the world told us who to be. In the Shaolin tradition, we speak of Wu Wei, the effortless flow. It is not laziness, it is alignment. When you are in alignment with your true self, you don't seek validation, because your being is the validation. You see, many of you live as if you are on a stage, constantly adjusting your performance for an audience that keeps changing. But there is a deeper truth. There is no audience. The people you worry about, their opinions are clouds, momentary, shifting, and intangible. If a cloud calls you ugly or weak, do you change your form for it? The only opinion that holds weight is the one you hold in silence when no one is watching. When you meditate, you return to your breath, to your body, to your now. This is who you are. When you train your body, it is not to impress others but to discipline your spirit. Learn to walk barefoot on the path of your truth, even when it is filled with thorns. Because the moment you stop fearing judgment, you become truly free. And freedom is not out there. It begins the moment you stop caring what other people think of you. Walk your path, be your silence, and live with integrity. Kabira speak. You keep walking. From the moment we enter this world, we begin absorbing impressions from those around us. Our parents, teachers, peers, and even strangers. Their words, their expectations, their judgments, they begin shaping the framework of our reality. Slowly, without realizing, we internalize an invisible code to be accepted. We must behave a certain way. To be loved, we must conform. This is the silent conditioning that follows us into adulthood. And by the time we become aware of it, we are no longer living life for ourselves. We are living a life constructed by the desires and projections of others. It is like trying to wear someone else's robe for years. It may look elegant, but it never quite fits, and we suffer silently in the name of belonging. But real belonging begins not with compliance, but with courage. The courage to be unapologetically who we are. You see, the need to please others is not inherently wrong. It is a natural extension of our desire to connect. But when connection becomes dependence, when harmony becomes self-erasure, then we have walked too far from our center. Pleasing others becomes a prison when it overrides your own truth. Every time you suppress your thoughts to keep the peace, every time you hide your emotions to avoid judgment, you teach yourself that your own voice is less valuable. And after years of doing this, you no longer need others to silence you. You begin silencing yourself. This is how many live, muted, restrained, and haunted by the quiet ache of not having lived authentically. The great paradox is that in trying to please everyone, you please no one, not even yourself. Because people do not remember you for your perfection, they remember you for your presence, and presence only comes when you drop the mask. In the Shaolin tradition, we learn from nature. The bamboo does not bend to impress the tree. It bends only to the wind. The mountain does not shrink to avoid being noticed. It stands because standing is in its nature. Likewise, the sun rises not to gain approval, but because rising is its purpose. So must it be with the human spirit. You were not born to be agreeable. You were born to be awake. You were born to explore the full expression of your being, not to fit a mold, but to break it. The world may reward imitation for a time, but it is originality that leaves a mark. And that originality is not found in rebellion or performance. It is found in stillness. In those quiet moments where you ask yourself, if no one were watching me, who would I be? That is the question. That is the gate. To walk the path of authenticity requires great discipline, not the discipline of action, but the discipline of awareness. Because you must catch yourself every time you are tempted to betray your truth for applause. You must pause when your instinct is to shape-shift just to feel accepted, and this is not easy. You may lose people, you may be misunderstood, but what you gain is far greater peace, a deep and unwavering peace that comes from no longer needing to perform. When your actions, words, and thoughts are aligned, there is no tension, there is only flow. And in that state, you begin to experience freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be exactly who you are. You will realize that you were never meant to blend in, because you were born to shine quietly, like a candle in the dark. Not to attract attention, but to simply illuminate. That is your birthright. Not to please others, but to become whole within yourself. In the modern world, people search endlessly for acknowledgement, a few words of praise, a gesture of approval, a nod from the crowd. Entire lives are shaped and decisions made based not on inner wisdom, but on external reaction. Social media has become a mirror, but it reflects not who we are, only who we pretend to be. This hunger for validation, though often unconscious, becomes the silent engine behind many of our actions. We chase recognition to feel worthy, applause to feel significant. But just as the desert drinks the rain and remains thirsty, so too does the soul stay hollow when fed only by the approval of others. No external compliment, no number of followers, no moment of applause will ever be enough, because validation that comes from the outside can never complete what must be built from within. To understand validation, we must first examine its nature. Why do we crave it? Because it offers a momentary sense of being seen, of being affirmed. But this is not the same as being fulfilled. External validation is like a breeze. It may cool you for a moment, but it never lasts. And if your self-worth is tied to that breeze, you will spend your life running after the wind. There is a deeper kind of strength that arises when you begin to sit with yourself, not in judgment, but in acceptance. The Shaolin monks say stillness is the mirror of the soul. In stillness, you come face to face with the parts of you that seek approval. You see their origins, the wounded child who was not heard, the ambitious mind craving to be significant. And in this recognition, there is healing. Because awareness itself is the first step toward freedom. When you stop outsourcing your worth to the world, you begin to build something far more powerful: inner authority. Inner authority does not shout, it does not need an audience. It is the quiet knowing that arises from self-understanding. You begin to validate yourself through your integrity, your discipline, your consistency. You meditate not to impress others with your calm, but to become familiar with your own nature. You train your body not to be admired, but to sharpen your spirit. Your identity is no longer fragile, no longer easily swayed by praise or criticism. And with this strength, you begin to navigate life with clarity. You do not ask, will they like me if I say this? Instead you ask, is this true for me to say? You shift from performing to being, and being is the most powerful presence there is. This journey is not without discomfort. At first you may feel a sense of emptiness as you pull back from the applause, as you detach from the praise you once lived for. But that emptiness is space. Space where your real self begins to emerge. There is a silent power in no longer needing others to see you, because you see yourself. You are no longer controlled by likes, comments, opinions, or judgment. You no longer fear disapproval, because your approval is rooted in something deeper, your alignment. And alignment is everything. When your thoughts, words, and actions all reflect your truth, you experience peace. Not the peace of comfort, but the peace of authenticity. This is what the path teaches us, to seek less from others and more from within. Because the person who walks in alignment needs no audience. They walk not for attention but for purpose. and purpose once found becomes its own validation. One of the great sources of inner conflict is our attachment to what others think of us. Praise lifts us, criticism wounds us. We become entangled in a cycle, rising and falling with each comment, each judgment, each facial expression. But stop for a moment and ask yourself, what is an opinion? Where does it come from? Most of the time, it is not born from truth, but from projection. A person's opinion of you is often a reflection of their own values, fears, wounds, and expectations. If someone is bitter, their judgment may come from that bitterness. If someone is insecure, their words may be laced with envy or fear. Why then should we allow these passing winds to shape our identity? Would you change the course of your life because a stranger momentarily disapproved of your path? If we continue living based on fleeting opinions, we are not living, we are reacting. Just as the weather changes, so too do people's perceptions. One day they call you wise. The next they say you're naive. One moment they admire your strength. Later they resent your discipline. These contradictions are not evidence of your inconsistency. They are evidence of the fickle nature of human perception. People are not wrong for having opinions, but it becomes dangerous when we begin to believe them more than we believe ourselves. The Shaolin teaching reminds us the mind that is easily stirred is the mind that has not yet been trained. When we chase praise or run from criticism, we are like leaves in the wind, directionless, easily moved, and easily broken. But through discipline and self-inquiry, we learn to become like the rooted tree, observing the wind, not dancing to it. The wind may blow fiercely, but the tree does not bow to every gust. There is a deep peace in realizing that opinions are not absolute. In fact, they are often contradictory. One person will say you are too quiet, another will say you speak too much. One will say you are too ambitious, another will say you lack direction. Which one is right? The truth is none of them know your full journey. They see only fragments, they interpret only moments, and those interpretations are filtered through their own limited lenses. You, however, live with the entirety of your experience. You know the reasons behind your silence. You know the fire beneath your stillness. You know the battles no one witnessed. So how can their surface-level judgments define the depths of your being? They cannot. You begin to realize that seeking stability in external approval is like building a temple on shifting sand. It will never hold. When you let go of the need to control how others perceive you, something extraordinary happens. You become free. Free to speak your truth without fear of rejection. Free to act without the constant burden of explanation. Free to exist just as you are. The practice of detachment from opinion is not about arrogance. It is about inner clarity. You are not dismissing others because you believe you are better than them. You are simply choosing to anchor yourself in what is real, your breath, your values, your effort, your presence. These are tangible, these are reliable. They do not change with moods or trends. They are your roots. And when you live from that rooted place, you become immune to the chaos of popular opinion. It may swirl around you, but it does not enter you, because you know that most opinions are illusions, echoes of other people's unfinished stories, and you are no longer here to carry their weight. Discipline is a word that makes many people uncomfortable. It is often associated with rigidity, restriction, or sacrifice. But in the Shaolin tradition, discipline is not about punishment, it is about liberation. Without discipline, we are enslaved by our impulses, emotions, and distractions. A mind without training becomes a chaotic space, pulled endlessly by desire and fear. But when discipline is cultivated, the mind becomes clear, stable, and strong, like still water that reflects everything but is disturbed by nothing. In this stillness, there is power. True freedom does not arise from doing whatever you want whenever you feel like it. True freedom is the ability to do what is needed, even when you don't feel like it. And that capacity, to act in alignment with what is necessary, not merely pleasurable, is only born through inner discipline. Most people confuse freedom with indulgence. They believe that being free means following every craving, expressing every emotion, and avoiding anything that feels difficult. But this kind of life leads not to expansion, but to enslavement. Enslavement to habit, mood, and reaction. Just like a wild horse with no rider, the untrained mind runs in all directions, exhausting itself without ever reaching the destination. But when discipline is introduced, the energy becomes focused. You begin to command your attention. You start choosing your words with awareness. You create space between stimulus and response. This is the beginning of mastery. And mastery is not about controlling the world. It is about learning to control yourself in any world. Whether you are surrounded by chaos or silence, whether you are celebrated or criticized, discipline ensures that your center remains intact. It is important to understand that discipline is not only about the big decisions. It lives in the smallest actions of daily life. Waking up early when your body resists. Finishing the practice when the mind wants to quit. Speaking with kindness even when provoked. Sitting still for 5 more breaths when your thoughts want to escape. These are not grand gestures. They are silent declarations of strength. Every time you choose discipline over comfort, you remind yourself that you are not a slave to the moment. You begin to rewrite the internal narrative. I am capable, I am resilient, I am grounded. These small victories compound. Over time they build a foundation of inner trust. You begin to know yourself not just through thought, but through action. And this kind of knowing, born from practice not philosophy, cannot be shaken by external noise. In the martial arts, form without discipline is merely performance. A kick may look graceful, a stance may seem impressive, but without the inner alignment of breath, mind, and intention, it is empty. So too in life, many perform strength on the outside, but are deeply fragile within. Real strength is invisible. It is in the ability to walk away when anger rises. It is in the power to say no when temptation whispers. It is in the focus to return to your breath when your thoughts scatter. These are all acts of discipline, and each one is a thread in the fabric of freedom. When you live this way, you no longer depend on the environment to dictate your state of being. You do not wait for motivation, because discipline becomes your source of energy. You do not need constant validation, because your own integrity is the reward. And in this state you are not bound by the changing winds of life. You are free, because you are steady. In a world constantly seeking attention, there is something profoundly powerful about the one who moves in silence. Not because they are timid, but because their energy is inwardly directed. To walk your own path in silence requires more courage than walking loudly in the direction of the crowd. Silence is not weakness. It is the stillness that precedes precision. It is the clarity that allows one to hear the deeper guidance within. Most people fear silence because it reveals too much. The doubts, the loneliness, the unanswered questions. But the practitioner, the seeker, the disciplined one, learns to enter silence with reverence. For in that silence your path is revealed. Not the path others have mapped out for you. Not the route laid down by society's rules, but the quiet road that belongs to your soul alone. Walking this kind of path demands solitude, and solitude often brings discomfort. When you no longer rely on others to validate your direction, you begin to feel the rawness of self-responsibility. There is no applause. There are no signs pointing the way. It is just you, your breath, your intention, and your steps. But within this aloneness lies a sacred strength. A strength that grows not from external reinforcement but from internal conviction. Every step you take, even when unnoticed, is a declaration: I choose this path, not because it is easy, but because it is mine. It is in those moments, when no one sees your discipline, when no one hears your prayers, when no one applauds your growth, that your spirit forges real power. Because real courage is not loud. It is quiet, humble, and deeply persistent. There will be times on this path when you are misunderstood. People will question your choices. They will offer you easier roads, louder destinations, more comfortable narratives. And it will be tempting, because the silent path is not glamorous. It often feels thankless. But the question you must return to is this: do I want to be accepted by others, or do I want to be aligned with myself? When you choose alignment, you choose peace over performance. You begin to respect your own pace, your own rhythm, your own timing. The bamboo does not race the oak. The moon does not compete with the sun. Each honors its own cycle. You too must honor yours, even when the world demands noise, speed, and visibility. Silence does not mean invisibility. In fact, the most profound transformations happen in silence, like the seed beneath the soil, the caterpillar in the cocoon, or the breath that moves the entire body without ever being seen. In the Shaolin path, the master does not speak much, not because he has nothing to say, but because his life has become the teaching. His every movement, every breath, every choice is a reflection of his internal discipline. He has walked through the fire of self-doubt, the shadows of ego, and the noise of distraction, and emerged rooted in the simplicity of being. When you walk your path in silence, you begin to embody this same still power. Your confidence no longer comes from argument, but from presence. You don't need to explain your direction because your discipline explains it for you. People may not understand you, but they will feel something unshakable in you. That is the effect of walking your path in silence. You are no longer proving yourself to the world. You are living from the truth that you no longer need to. And so the question remains, who are you when no one is watching? Not the version that conforms, not the version that pleases, but the one who simply is. You were not sent into this life to walk the path others mapped for you. You were given breath, body and mind, not to become a copy, but to become complete. And that completeness begins when you stop bending under the weight of opinions that do not belong to you. The world will continue to speak, sometimes with praise, sometimes with criticism. Let it speak. But do not let it decide who you are. That decision belongs to you, and only you. There is great discipline in silence. There is great power in stillness. There is great freedom in no longer needing to be understood. When you stop caring what others think, you do not become careless. You become clear. Clear about your values. Clear about your purpose. Clear about your path. So walk, not to be seen, not to be liked, but to live in alignment. And if they do not understand, let them watch in silence as you rise anyway. Because the loudest sound in the world is the quiet strength of a human being who has returned home to themselves.